one of the things my encouragement is to focus on truth. One of the first things that Paul says was, think about truth, whatever is true. So my hope as we kind of move on from here is that we really focus on what's true, kind of what are the big facts, and not get caught up in the tyranny of the news feed, as I would imagine that's tempting to do. For those of you who saw a Facebook post I did about a week and a half ago, just talking about some things to be thinking about, and I want to unpack those a little bit more for us. And so first I want to start with, as a family, whether there's one of you or 20 of you, my encouragement is to ramp up and my guess is you're already doing this, the thoughtful, reasoned, depassioned communication around money and situations with spouse, partner, family, around your particular financial realities and the implications of what's going on. My guess is that you've seen and heard the panic route. Obviously, just look out the lines outside of grocery stores. And though there are lines outside of BCS when you come in to shop, it's not due to panic. It's due to help keep everybody safe. Really, when it comes to that thoughtful piece, remember the big idea here in terms of pushing back against anxiety and fear is to think intentionally about what we have to work with, what we've been entrusted with. And particularly for those of you who've taken the finance class and who we've met, talked before, I've mentioned the family vision, which is the value system that drives our decision making. And what can often happen during high stress, confused times is that framework, we toss it out the window and it's just reacting in the moment and triaging. My encouragement is to go back to that and to live in the value system that you have as a family. This time is also really interesting to be able to kind of reset some of the family culture that takes place. Not only just about money, but about time. As people think about, how do I keep myself, and if you've kids, from going nuts and driving up the walls, which my guess is already starting to happen, how do we get creative to still live out our family values in a more constrictive environment? So it creates a chance to be creative and to get back to the roots and the values that are meaningful for us as families. One of the things that my family started doing was happy hour. We include the kids in this, so it's not necessarily we're finding the local distillery, but the idea is that when I get off of work, we come downstairs, we have a fun snack that 90% of the time has come from BCS, and a fun drink, whatever that shit may be, and we play some music, and we just kind of play together as a family. And we introduced that last week, and we've been trying to do that every night at the end of the workday before we transition into the evening. Just one small little thing to kind of help bring a little bit more light, a little bit more lightness into the family. And then my wife had this really fun idea that said, well, let's expand this. Again, thinking family culture and values, which for us, it's part of loving our neighbors. What if we invited the neighborhood to do an outdoor happy hour? So we had seen this done with other friends in different parts of the country. And so my wife texted several households in our neighborhood, and on 6 o'clock on Wednesday, we went outside, and there were four households that joined us outside for about an hour and a half. Kids were running around, adults were 6-ish feet apart, but you can still have a reasonable conversation. And it went on for about an hour and a half. Really fun time, got to know some neighbors. And so it's just a way, this season really allows us to think about, if we take advantage of it, the opportunities that actually encourage community when, normally speaking, it would feel like a hampering, constricting. Again, my encouragement particularly is the depassioned. So if there's a lot of feelings and emotions, tumultuous kinds of things, if there's looming job layoff, or you have the job layoff and you're trying to scramble, the temptation is to just ditch what we know to be true and just go with how we're feeling in the moment. So my caution there is to push back against that and think about the truth and the facts. So again, on the Facebook post, one of the things after we talked a little bit about that was to kind of get into the practicalities. So just as a side note, if questions start coming up, feel free to put it in the chat, send me a question, and I'll do my best to answer those. So for those of you who've experienced a job loss or a reduction of income or hours, my encouragement first is to kind of take stock of where is all the money. So what's true? Sit down, like, where are the accounts at? Where are the loan payments at? Get a clarity on where things are at. Then the first thing I would do after that is contact all the lenders. So whether that's credit card companies, car loan, whoever has the car loan, whoever has the mortgage, if that's the case, any lender ought to be contacted during this time. Right now, all of those utility companies included in that, credit card companies, lenders for cars, personal loans, home lines of credit, mortgages, et cetera, all have or are setting up deferment programs or some kind of credit freeze, some kind of skip a payment month, something to that effect are happening right now. So if you're in that category of money coming in and slowed down or stopped, that would be practically one of the next things to do after you've kind of taken stock of where all of the resources are currently at. If I was talking to somebody this morning, and she had her utilities on equal pay, which is the idea where you spread out the payments so they're equal throughout the year, so you don't have these major ups and downs throughout the year in terms of your utilities. But we're also entering in a warmer, technically, and lighter time of year, and so generally our utilities will start to decrease right about now. So if you're looking for a way to free up a little bit of extra money, it might be a good time, if you're on equal pay, to get off of equal pay and just handle the payment for April, May, June, and so on. If you're looking for ways to kind of free up a little bit of monthly money. If you're needing to contact a lender and there isn't specific outlines for how to approach them, one thing is to write an email called a financial hardship email, and you basically walk through the situation. So if it's a job loss or a reduction in hours, you codify it or classify it and say, I work here, my hours have been reduced due to COVID, I'm asking for a reduction in interest rate, or I'm asking for a freeze, or I'm asking for skipping payments to buy me time. The more clear and specific you get, the easier it makes for the lenders to understand your situation. Right now, that's not so much of an issue because everybody is kind of in the same boat. So their restrictions right now in terms of lenders are much more loose. A lot of mortgage companies right now are doing about 3-month deferments. So for the next 3 months, if you were to contact your home mortgage lender, you can get a typically 3-month deferment. But what the backside of that at the moment means is that you have to make up those payments. Usually so if you were to take April, May, and June off, starting in July, your mortgage payment would be quite a bit higher to help get caught up. Some will do what's known as a loan modification, and they'll actually adjust the terms of the loan to add an extra 3 months on the back end. They will typically only do this once or twice during the life of the loan, depending on the situations. Always a good idea to contact the credit card companies and ask for like an interest rate freeze. Again, if you're in a spot where the income is dried up or reduced, but over communicate. Don't go the opposite. Don't go quiet. Don't hide, but over communicate. Excuse me a second. All right. If there isn't a change in income, and if you're like, oh, income's doing okay, we're still cruising along, or even if there is a change in income, please hear me on this. Do not make any drastic financial decisions. So a couple examples of that are buying a new to you car. Unless you had several $1,000s saved up already, separate from the emergency fund, and your car just blew up yesterday. Literally blew up. Then, okay, you can go buy that car if you absolutely need it for work, kind of thing. But nothing drastic. If you're in the middle of a home buying process, you might consider pausing that, depending on your income stability. So if you're in an industry that's like humming along and doing just fine, and the trajectory of that is doing just fine, then okay. But if you're not in the middle of a major home buying process or something to that effect, nothing drastic. Also to that nothing drastic is please don't cash out retirement. For those of you who are like, yeah, that makes sense, don't do that, because the temptation is pretty big to do that as you see your retirement dropping by 30 to 40%. That can be a big temptation because the fear kicks in and you're like, well, the economic outlook's not good. I don't like where this is going. Just an encouragement, don't do that, because on paper, if your retirement drops 30%, on paper it dropped 30%. In reality, you have not lost a thing. It's only until you sell or cash out is when you actually lose. This happened in 2001, this happened in 2008 and 9, happened again, and it's happened before, and it's going to happen again later. But it's always come back with a vengeance. This one may take a little bit longer, but just my encouragement, don't cash it out, because then you will actually lose all that money. So if you're tempted to do something drastic, or you're like, yeah, that's nice, Dino, but I have to have the money, the emergency fund is gone, I'm running out of money, then my encouragement is talk to at least 2 other people, counsel, who are typically older and wiser than yourself. Now, if you happen to be the oldest person in your network, okay, then go ahead and find someone younger than you. But 2 others who are not in your home and who come from different background stage of life, because they can help you think through the dynamics outside of your context. So if you're thinking about some kind of a major decision, major courses relative to your situation, get and seek counsel. And then as you're doing and seeking the counsel, you have to wait until the emotion subsides. For some people, this might last a couple of days, couple of weeks, shouldn't last much longer than that. But so that way you can clearly see the implications and ramifications of the decision. Remember, during all this time, we're trying to be thoughtful and intentional about what we know to be true, what's likely to happen, and what's just generally wise to consider and be about. So those are a couple of things just practically to consider as we're kind of wading through this time. I'm trying to stay away from projections on how long this thing may or may not go. I'm staying away from that on purpose. I'm just thinking about how can we best set up our particular situation to wade through however long this does or doesn't last. All right, let's talk about the stimulus check, which is part of a broader bill that was signed into law a weekish ago, which is actually, that was the third bill, potentially 5 that are coming from the feds, but again, not to worry about those. A large part of that bill that was signed in a week ago had to do with the checks that are coming to households across the nation. So I'll just do a really, really brief, quick, structurally comment on that. It's easy to find this out on the internet. It's everywhere. They should start showing up at the earliest about 2 weeks and upwards to 3-ish weeks, especially if you've done direct deposit for the last year or 2 years of taxes. It will be coming straight to the bank account that they have on file. So if you are single and make under $75,000 a year, the adult in the home, which would be 18 and over, will get $1,200. And that is phased out. The more you make, the less of that $1,200 you'll get. If you're married, that amount doubles to $150,000 as the threshold. So if you make $149,900 of taxable income, you'll get $1,200 per adult. And then for anybody with kiddos, as long as they are 16 and younger, you will get an additional $500 per kiddo. So a family of 4 who make under that $150,000 mark should expect to get about $3,400. Yesterday, I spoke with a CPA and asked them specifically, what are the tax implications of the stimulus? Because previous stimuluses have been actually a credit against our future taxes. And so I asked specifically, like, is this going to basically reduce the amount of tax return money that somebody would get next February, March, or April 2020 taxes? And he said, no. This is a straight gift, essentially, tax-free, not included in income, and so on. A couple of questions that I see coming through. I'll take a moment and pause on that. Kids who are 17 and 18, if they are not working and are 17 or 18, you or they do not get anything. If you are self-employed, you also get that amount as well. And then for those people who have their own business, who are self-employed or run a business or run a nonprofit, there's an entire another part of that bill that gives access to money in the form of a loan at really low interest rate. I'm going to just summarize it. There's a lot of nuance to this. That it gives basically a $10,000 kind of emergency money now, that if it's used for payroll and overhead of the business, it will then become a grant, and you actually keep that money with no tax implications, or it's not a loan. There's also more parts to that bill. If you are a small business owner or have your own business, you could go to 2 places. The IRS website has all kinds of stuff right now. And then if you go to Small Business Association, I think it's .org, so SBEA.org, all kinds of content for small businesses. Question, somebody just turned 8 or is about to turn 18. She filed taxes and is working. Does she get anything? In theory, yes. So if you're working taxable income and have filed, then you should get one. But I have not read the entire 900-page bill that was passed. So there might be some fine print in there that excuses an 18-year-old or something like that. Okay, so just making sure, just taking a brief pause to read through the questions so that I'm not missing anybody. If you haven't filed taxes yet, I'm not sure if this money is going to show up for you later. So if you have a delayed tax return, which the IRS just postponed it to July 15th, if you delay it, that money will still be there. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. But if you haven't filed in the last couple of years, I'm not sure if you'll get it or not. If someone in the home's on Social Security and haven't filed taxes, they will still get it. The website to go for the bill, I think the two best websites that I know about so far is the IRS. They have a page specifically dedicated to all the tax implications of the bill itself. I don't know of a website that unpacks the entire bill. There are ones that focus on the business side. There are ones focused on the loan part of it. There's some focus that's on the stimulus. So I don't have a good answer for that. The $500 per kid up to 2 kids is not true. So it's per kid no matter how many kids you have. So I had not heard anywhere that there's a cap on how many kids will be able to have access to that particular money. So whether or not you get $1,200 or $5,000, depending on your family size, what to do with the money? So, right, there's only 3 ways to do with it. You can either spend it, and I'll unpack these in a second. You can save it, or you can give it away. So let's talk about spending it. Like a lot of what I'm going to say around these 3 categories, it depends. Another question I just saw, should I plan on paying taxes on this money? No. The CPA that I talked to said this is nothing in the bill, as far as he had saw it and researched and read, is going to be taxable. Now, could that change? Maybe, but I don't think so. So spending it depends. If you're behind on bills, then it might be a wise idea to use part of that to get current. But I wouldn't do that until you've contacted the companies or utilities or lenders who you're behind on. And then I would suggest using part of that to get caught up. I probably would not encourage to go stock up. Use that as a bunker building kind of money. I probably would not suggest that. Again, BCS is here. We're not going anywhere. So at least on the food side of things, the Lord has been very kind and gracious to us, and our donations have exponentially increased to the point where we have to turn it down because we just don't have the space. So I wouldn't necessarily need to go buy $1,000 worth of can number 5 goods and store them in your basement somewhere. I wouldn't do that. So saving it, kind of the second category to talk about. My overall encouragement to families is to save the stimulus money. Now, the main point behind that is to kind of infuse families with a little bit of money to kind of help them float along. So the idea is that they actually spend it to kind of reboot or encourage the economy to keep going. Generally, okay, fine, but specifically for us at BCS, my encouragement is to actually save it first. Because savings is about time. It buys you time to adjust. And in this case, it buys you time to keep the bills current, to continue to make the payments if that's the case. And if you've lost income, then it allows you to have more resources to last longer without the job. As a side note to that, if you've lost your job or you know someone that's lost their job, the unemployment situation right now is actually quite amazing, though it's a little bit of a lag because we've had as a country, record amounts of people applying for unemployment, more so than we've ever had in our whole history that we've been tracking it. So besides the state paying the typical, I think it's 60% or 50% of your take-home pay each week, the feds are giving an extra $600 a week on top of that. So for a lot of families, that's actually gets a lot of people back to what they would have been making, not always, but for some families, it would have got them back to what they would have been making. And that extra $600 will last for about 13 weeks. And then unemployment on top of that will last another 13 weeks. So the unemployment has actually been extended, I think, by about 6 months, just to buy time to get new income. So a good question somebody put in, what about using the stimulus money to pay off debt and to free up money going towards debt? That's one of the tensions is, do I use that to reduce the debt so I free up payments? I would say depends on how much debt it is, what you're talking about. So I'll just run a scenario too here. So if you've got $2,000 on a credit card and you've got $15,000 on a car loan, and that's it, and you get the stimulus check for, let's say, $3,000. I don't know if the actual math works out that way, but let's say it does. It would depend at that point how much you have in savings. So in that scenario, there's $2,000 on the credit card, you get a $3,000 stimulus check, and you only have $500 in savings. No, I would not pay off the credit card. I would bank all of it and continue to slowly pay down the credit card. Now, it is at this point very, very situational because it really depends on what your income is and the stability of the industry or the job that you're in. So if it's super consistent, you're in a high demand environment or context, and you're like, this job's not going anywhere, pretty confident about that, then wouldn't necessarily worry about that. But if your income is a little bit, not quite sure where this is going to go, my general encouragement is to save it first and then to slowly pay down the debt. And one of the reasons why I say that is to pay a little bit of extra in interest in the long run is much better than paying everything off and then having very little savings for when the income does stop and something breaks in the meantime, because we're assuming you got to be careful not to assume that like your appliances aren't going to go down during this time. Right? Like Murphy's Law, what could happen will probably happen. And so my encouragement is to not isolate those things and hedge against stuff breaking and things going down south by putting extra in savings generally. But if you've got 5,000 in savings, 2,000 on the credit card, and you've got 3,000 coming in, then sure, pay the debt off and then bank the other 1,000. So now your emergency fund's at 6,000 with no credit card debt. So it's a combination of income stability, current savings, and the debt amount and the kind of debt that it is. Where to put it? So I was talking with some folks who are thinking about, well, I don't know if I want to put my money in the bank right now because of what's happening and so on, so I just want to keep it in cash. That's fine if you want to do that. But just be careful not to get so panicky or fearful that you're burying your money in the backyard. I don't recommend that, right? Sure, have some cash on hand in case the ATM goes down or they run out of money. Have a little bit on hand, that's fine. The rest, I would put it into some kind of higher interest earning savings account. Typically what I talk about are online banks. So that you're actually making a little bit of money as it is. So right now banks are giving very little interest rate. So some examples of online banks are Ally Bank, Synchrony Bank, American Express, the banking division, not the credit card division, Marcus by Goldman Sachs. I'm personally using American Express. I don't get paid to say this. We get 1.6% interest. You're not going to get rich off that, but it is something. Somebody posed a question about, do we have to do anything for unemployment to get the extra $600? No, it's an automatic increase if you apply for unemployment. So we talked a little bit about spending it, saving it is my general encouragement. And then the last category is give it. So one of the ways to help push back against the frenetic energy that's happening in our culture and in our neighborhoods and relatives and friends is that kind of panic-stricken, not so thoughtful, kind of selfish tip that's happening. So we're kind of tilting into being potentially a little bit more selfish. So to push back against that is to find ways to, and I talk about this on the Facebook post, to give and serve. That protects our hearts and minds from getting so engulfed personally that we lose sight of the bigger picture. And so it might be good to take part of that stimulus money and to give part of it to friends, neighbors, something. Give part of it away, give all of it away, depending on where you're at situationally. But that's one real good practical mechanism to push back against the vibe that the culture is wrestling with. So as we've I'm just going to wrap up here. Again, the things to be focused on, my encouragement, is to go back to what's meaningful as a family. How do we still live out the values that are at play? How do we do that creatively? And how do we encourage others along that same path? So whether it's churches, community groups, affinity groups, organizations that you're a part of, right? It's tricky right now because they can't gather. And so the social connectivity is being stretched. And folks are finding it difficult to really connect and stay involved. So part of my encouragement for you as families and individuals is to look at how do I, in the midst of this, not just look out for my own needs, but the needs of others through service or generosity, and what does that look like? And that goes back to how do we get creative during a time where we're forced to be, which is actually a good thing. It's a form of a reset button. So those are just a couple of thoughts I had around the stimulus, around just kind of managing through this. And if you've got more questions, things come up that you're like, you didn't really quite deal with this, my situation doesn't quite fit that, feel free to send me an email. I'll be happy to chat with you. So just want to end with one final prayer, and then we'll sign off, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Lord, again, thank you for this time. Thanks for a chance to talk and share, and I ask that you would help our families at Birch to thrive in the midst of struggle and hardship. Help us to increase generosity, be wise with what you entrusted to us. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Yes, I did record this, and we'll be putting it up at some point, hopefully soonish, later on. So I hope you have a great rest of your day and weekend, and thanks for taking the time to hang out together.